everybody. Welcome to Hospitality Talks. We are very glad to be with you one more time with our guest this time from based in Asia. Just to recap, 2020 was not a year anybody had planned or wished for. Companies had to adapt. A lot of changes were made. As a matter of fact, changes were brought about that would have typically taken us decades that were implemented in a very, very short time period. This included organizational structures, technological adoptions, business acquisition methodologies that were changed. Future of the work arrived much earlier. Technologies like this, what we are using to bring these sessions to you, were talked about, were not really implemented. Our business, as Milton Hershey of Hershey Chocolate had said, the business is a matter of human service, and that quotation is more applicable in our business than anywhere else. I'm Abid Butt. We're glad to have you at Hospitality Talks, and I'm here with my co-host, Sam-Erik. Sam, good day.
Good day and good morning to you, Abid. You are very early up in US. My name is Sam-Erik Ruttmann. I am the co-host for the Hospitality Talks, and I'm also absolutely delighted that we have the privilege of having some great guests today on our show, and some great companies covering from India and Hong Kong based and then Singapore based, and it'll be interesting discussion to see what are the strategies and how the future lies ahead, because all of us of course have been deeply effective globally on this pandemic, but I think there might hopefully is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm looking forward to hearing what our guests have to share their thoughts and ideas about the future, how they see it.
Thank you, Sam. So let me introduce our panelists. I'll start with Stefan Leser. He's based in Hong Kong, Chief Executive Officer of Langham Hospitality Group. Peng Choe, who is CEO for Pan Pacific Hotel Group based out of Singapore. And last but certainly not least, Puneet Chhatwal, who is Managing Director and CEO of the Indian Hotel Company. Gentlemen, welcome to Hospitality Talks. I hope your days are going okay. If you all are okay, we will get straight into it. So the Puneet, if you're okay, we're going to start with you. You're involved in a lot of the industry organizations, Puneet, in addition to running the hotel company, which is more than a full-time job, but you were able to manage all this with multiple different brands spread out all over Asia Pacific area. Tell us what percentage of your hotels were operating in 2020, and what percentage of hotels were shut down, please?
So, Abid, thank you, and good afternoon to the colleagues on this panel and to the audience. I think it's a very interesting and a very difficult journey to explain, because for us, the pandemic really started in the month of March. We had early signs in February, so where our portfolio is. And the lockdown period started towards the end of March, and almost 80% of the industry in India had experienced a lockdown, and the hotels were shut for definitely the months of April, May, June, till the beginning of July. So they were officially locked down, and all that we were doing was either hosting customers that needed quarantine, or the medical staff, or what we call the frontline workers, serving the communities during the outbreak of COVID-19. Thereafter, we started seeing a slow opening of properties. So I would say half of the portfolio started operating, accelerated to almost 70%. And then came the mutation of the virus. And, although we are in operation, but I consider operations in London, New York, San Francisco, Cape Town as being practically shut. Um, so all in all, at any given time, across all our five brands, of course, the main one being the Taj, almost towards the end of last year, and now as I speak, 80% of our portfolio is in operation.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's superb that you're able to bring most of your hotels back online. Puneet, during this time period, what kind of changes were you having to implement, whether it was organizational structure issues, whether it was staffing, or new businesses that you might have considered adopting?
I think it's very interesting. The first and foremost was changing our own mindset. And it started with safety and security of our customers, but also of our associates. So, as we were one of the pioneers in terms of hosting the medical staff, our associates working in our properties became the frontline workers and were exposed by virtue of hosting the medical staff to the virus. So I think the paramount importance for us was given to our customers being safe, and at the same time our associates being safe. I think we did have a very bad experience of 26/11 when the Taj Mahal Palace and Tower experienced the terror attack. But this was something very different. It was not one hotel, it was across all our portfolio. So I think that was the first change. The second was, what do you need to do when your revenues drop by suddenly, overnight, by 90 to 95%? And in the best case, at what we call the Q1, as our financial year is from April to March, we were looking at 15% of the revenues compared to the same quarter the previous year. So when we went to business schools, we were taught minus 5, 10, 15, 20%, and we did sensitivity analysis. But I don't think we had a clue what to do when you have almost zero revenues or minus 85 or minus 80%. I think the third thing that we had to change was in the way we looked at things. Suddenly, there was a paradigm shift. And even after we started slowly opening the hotels, how we would open, what are the protocols? What are the protocols given by WHO? What are the protocols and directives of your own ministries of health or of home in the nation? So a lot of these things were absolutely new for all of us, and we had to deal with that. And at the same time, from serving customers, the fourth biggest change was we were suddenly supplying meals to all the hospitals that were involved in with the COVID in the cities of Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Coimbatore, some of the key cities in India. And we ended up, serving 3 million meals. And last not least, we did not have the CSR budget to host approximately 75,000 room nights for medical staff and provide 3 million meals, with the revenues practically coming to zero. The one big change I saw was how people rallied behind us and gave us donations and monies in an institution we have called the Taj Public Service Welfare Trust, where we were able to raise almost $4 to $5 million to serve the community by doing the meal service to the migration workers, to the medical staff, and to hosting the medical staff in our hotel. So I would say some of these things, we had never thought of. We were just confronted with, and there was no time to think. It was just to act and act in a responsible manner, given the 118 years history of the company, which, and in line with the philosophy of the founder, Jamshedji Tata, that your community is not just another stakeholder, rather the purpose of the existence of any business. And I think this was something when you read is very different, but when you're confronted with a situation and when you have to act is very different. And that drives a very big change. And we feel, on one hand, sad that we had to go through all the pandemic and all the destruction of our business globally. I don't think any nation was spared. But on the other hand, it will always go down, at least in my memory as an experience, how change happens so fast, and sometimes even for, it's for a very good reason, and you get an opportunity to do a service no matter in which job you are in.
Well, this pandemic, unlike any other crisis that our industry has dealt with, it has been global, and it's almost we're fighting a battle with somebody that we cannot see. The financial crisis, the last downturn in the industry, at least things were open and they were we were going through it. But as you mentioned, industry has come together in a big way. Unfortunately, not under the best of circumstances, but industry has rallied, and hopefully we will come out of it stronger. Puneet, you have a whole host of different brands, different positioning. Any particular types of hotels that are performing better than the others as we come out of it? And I will turn it over to Sam after this.
Well, one thing which is very interesting that has happened is, as international borders are practically shut, except for some of the bubble travel that is happening, the business turned very domestic. And within domestic, it was not corporate, it's really the leisure that's been driving demand. And we have a very good resort portfolio on the domestic front. The Taj brand is considered as the founder of destinations like Goa or Kerala, or now even Andaman and Nicobar. So we definitely saw demand coming back in resort destinations. In our palaces in the state of Rajasthan, a lot of leisure demand came in. A lot of demand came for smaller weddings, as the numbers were restricted to 50 or 100. So I would say the hill stations like Simla, the religious destinations like Rishikesh, states like Goa, where we have significant presence. We are by far, the largest operator of hotels and homestays out there. When we go to south towards the Coorg area, which is 4 hours driving distance from Bangalore, and very recently, we've seen a surge in demand in Kerala. So all in all, domestic leisure. And we launched a lot of other new businesses which also help us to propel demand. One of that is our home delivery food service under the brand Cumin. Our homestays under the brand name of Ama. It's only a portfolio of 25 homestays, but all of them were fully booked. So all in all, some of these initiatives, some of the portfolio, and I should not forget to mention our brand called Ginger, which is value driven, or we call it in a lean lux category. Ginger has seen a very good revival and is already operating at north of 60% occupancy for the month of December and January to date. So demand has really come at a value level, at the, some would like to call it, at the bottom of the pyramid, and or in luxury resort travel or upper upscale resort travel. And that has helped us in the last couple of months.
Superb. Well, thank you for that insight, Puneet. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment.
Well, thank you. You mentioned something very interesting because it coincides with something I read about in preparation for our show today. It was about the wellness travel and the wellness tourism. And recently, HVS produced a small report about that the fastest growing trend in tourism is wellness, in fact. Now, but it still has yet to achieve the full potential. So if we are looking ahead with the urge of people traveling from internationally eventually, how do you see your preparation for promoting the wellness tourism internationally to bring those hungry guests to come and to enjoy the special wellness and the holistic treatments they can get in these very special places?
Yeah, I think the trend on wellness and the spas and feel good factor came in already more than a decade or 2 decades ago. I think it became more prominent already 10 years ago. And what the COVID-19 has done, it has accelerated the need of the holistic well-being of human beings. So I think the general trend in that direction was very evident. And we as a group had launched a brand called Jiva, which is a brand that runs around 75 of the spas. And now we have an opportunity to collaborate with some of very professional Ayurvedas or yoga institutions, and we are working on that very closely. We have a couple of those already in few of our hotels, but we want to broaden that base and take our Jiva brand to the next level. And definitely, wellness is here to stay. And if anything, this pandemic is done, I'm repeating myself, is consolidated the belief in spending time and money on wellness. And you know what? If we were to ask, even amongst our own community of hoteliers, I think the last 10 months, a lot of us took time to start getting fitter than we were before because wellness became such an important subject for us. And some of us were really waiting for the spas to open so that you could go and get those different kind of massages to release, the stress levels that had accumulated. So I am a very firm believer, without having read this report which came out yesterday or today, that wellness will become more and more important and fundamental part of our lives, whether it happens in hotels or on wellness farms or wherever that might be. But this trend is here to stay and is not going anywhere.
I found it very interesting that you have, in fact, a ministry of Ayush, who is certifying various spas and wellness centers. That's something I didn't know about. Is that something? Are you in cooperation with the ministries on these, or that they're certifying your locations for? So because I think they are.
Yes. So Sam, sorry, I interrupted you. Did you finish or asking the question, or did I interrupt you?
No, please go ahead. Just if you can elaborate on the relationship with the ministry and the certification and the quality inspection that we have.
We don't do that directly, Sam, because we have different associations and bodies which work with different ministries, which work on the tourism policy, which work on this, adventure tourism, ecotourism, wellness tourism, and it's a part of the national tourism policy. So this is done in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism, but we also have bodies like Hotel Association of India, Confederation of Indian Industries, FICCI, and other bodies like Faith. So we have 4 or 5 very active bodies that actually collaborate with the ministries and try to come up with a framework on all these policies which the industry can adapt, instead of individual chains and individual hotel groups working with the ministries on their own. We used to do that, but in the last 20 years, it has changed and evolved in a more structured organizational fashion.
My final question before I turn over to Abid is that social functions like weddings must have played a substantial role in the social life in hotels. How do you see now, looking ahead, this function? Do you feel this is going to still continue in the great tradition of Indian weddings in those hotels?
Yeah, I think eventually it will come back. I don't think that the large weddings of 1,000 people or those dream weddings are going away forever. I think it's all depends on how quickly we are able to roll out the vaccine program, how comfortable people are, and I think people will start stepping out. We already saw that with the domestic travel demand when it started coming back to the resort destinations. And I hope so too for the industry because as one of the exceptional, I would say, not only countries but regions in the world, we do rely on almost 45% of our total revenue coming from food and beverage, and a significant amount of that revenue comes from those beautiful weddings that take place in this country, which we call destination weddings or the fairy tale weddings. And they are happening, but in smaller numbers. So, what is the latest that we are witnessing is suppose you're allowed 50 people in a certain destination for a wedding, then the wedding is getting divided over 5 days of functions. So you're still able to get the 250 people with 50 people on each day who are different, and that way you're able to, invite all the near and dear ones, whether they're related to you or they're friends with you. However, I see no reason why this number is not going to go back to 500, 700, 1,000, or even higher numbers. And and I think this is what the industry needs. I think we just need to get the vaccination and inculcate back in the customers the confidence that it is healthy, safe, and fine to hold such events again in the hotels going forward.
Thank you. And now over to you, Abid.
Thank you, Sam. And thanks, Puneet. That's wonderful. And I know how critical these social functions, but particularly weddings are. They're huge, gorgeous, very well choreographed functions that typically have large attendees. So it's a very creative way to break it up, but still deliver them culturally. So thanks for sharing that. Talk a little bit about the luxury travel, Puneet. You have some palatial hotels, very iconic, lot of heritage. Tell us a little bit about how do you see the luxury travel evolving?
Well, luxury is being actually less sensitive in terms of on the domestic front in terms of traveling to these palaces, and I don't see a change in that trend. What we are missing is the international customers who would come, especially between the months of November and February, and pay the prices these palaces deserve. Of course, our Lake Palace Hotel in Udaipur, or Umaid Bhavan in Jodhpur, or the Rambagh Palace in Jaipur, or the Falaknuma in Hyderabad. I mean, these are just so beautiful. They take you down into history of like 7, 8, 900 years, and experiencing that is something very special. So I think we are very blessed to have this kind of a portfolio and being leaders in this kind of segment and business. Another luxury segment, albeit at a very small level, that we have besides our generic Taj portfolio is our safari business. So Taj safaris are also very much liked. They get very high average rates. And what is currently happening is around 25 million Indians were traveling abroad. For one reason or the other, they are in India. So, if they were taking one vacation in one of our properties or in a property on the domestic front, now suddenly, because they're not traveling abroad, they have the ability to use more of more of these palaces and kind of embrace the luxury travel domestically. So I'm quite optimistic on the luxury travel future going forward. I think internationally, destinations which were more like a hub, which were used for transit, and then you were flying somewhere else, they might have some issue in the short term, but even that will come back in the long term.
Fair enough. One last question before we bring our next guest in, Puneet. What is your growth plan? Anything specific, any segment that you would like to grow in, any geographies that you focused on? What's the future for the company?
Well, one thing which we recently studied is that 85% of our portfolio is still very much South Asia. South Asia is Indian subcontinent. And I think we need to remain very strong on our home front and selectively grow in key destinations of the world. That's a very simplistic form of a growth strategy that we have and we will follow. We've been very blessed to have grown with 66 new agreements signed in the last 3 years. Now, given the size of the portfolio where we were coming from, that's almost a 50% increase in the portfolio in 3 years' time. And I have a lot of faith, besides the Taj brand and all our other brands, and a few repositionings that we have done. We've repositioned the Ginger brand. We think Ginger has a huge potential to grow to 500 hotels over the next 10, 15 years in India. It could happen faster, but definitely over the next 15 years, it could grow to a 500 hotel portfolio. The same thing on our Ama homestays. I think we could do a lot of homestay business as we have the opportunity through our group company, the Tata Group, to already get a lot of these homestays, the directors' bungalows, as we would call it, that exist to become kind of an internal aggregator. So yes, very excited about some of these brands. We will keep growing the other brands, which is Vivanta or a collection which we call Indian Hotel Selections. That growth would not be mass growth, but it will definitely also grow. But the majority of the growth will come in the luxury segment with the Taj brand, followed by the Ginger brand.
Well, thank
And of
you.
course,
Thank you for that, Puneet. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with you. But at this particular point, I'd like to bring on our next guest, Peng Choe, CEO of Pan Pacific Hotels. Peng, though this is meant to be the strategies to thrive as we come out of this pandemic, very, very briefly, tell us what 2020 was like for you. What percentage of the hotels were operating versus percentage that was shut down?
Yeah, 2020, I think, we got hit quite early on. I think, after Chinese New Year in, especially beginning February, all the Chinese properties, hotels, we had to shut down. As you know, in China, when there's lockdown, it's a real lockdown. So we had to, take a very sharp, quick decision to close it down. And later on, the Americas, and Canada, we had to close down, and then also Australia. But I must say that learning to pivot is something that we've learned. So example is we got very thankful for governments that help the situation. So example, in Singapore, we got 8 hotels and service suite, and also in Australia, we got quite a number of properties there. The government has been very, very helpful with reliefs, of course, and also what I call the isolation business. So all of a sudden, when we pivot and brought all these business into the hotel, we we started getting about 90 to 100% occupancies. China too, after 2 months of severe lockdown, they huge domestic market get to open up all of a sudden, and all of a sudden we get 80, 90% occupancy. So at this present moment, I think only about 5 of our hotels are still kind of waiting to open. The rest are already kind of moving up. So we ended up, a little fortunate that by 2020 we at least were EBITDA cash positive, after paying all expenses. So we're thankful for that.
Oh, that's terrific. I think you're in a very unique position because 2020 has mostly been about survival. Peng, any particular strategic initiatives that you're working on at this particular point for the current year as we come out of this pandemic?
Yeah, I look at this 2021 or even this period of COVID as a huge reset button. And so first of all, we know that probably the next 6 months the skies are not going to open, and so what whole focus really is on domestic market. And reaching out to domestic market, we need to make sure that the trust is there for those to come to hotels to stay. We got staycation, workation. We got what I call Singapore rediscovery packages. So it's mingled with F&B, and we're going into weddings. So the next 6 months really is nothing but domestic market, because I think even with vaccination, international skies probably won't open till I think, maybe the third and fourth quarter of 2021. But looking at the reset is really having to rejig everything that we do so that in the post-pandemic, post-COVID, will be sort of ready. So, example, what I mean, we're looking at all our structures. I still feel that in hotels, it's a very labor-intensive industry. So we're going through a whole period of what I call the delayering. I mean, just give you an example. Typically in a hotel, you got the doorman, the bellman, the security, the concierge, the receptionist, senior receptionist, reception manager, front office manager, duty manager. I mean, it's layers after layers, and of course it's traditional. But why don't we redesign that whole offering? And even if we lift everyone up to, reception, concierge, guest service officers, pay them a bit more, but, delayer so that they are actually multitask, We're looking at clustering so that, every hotel wants to have their own IT, their own finance, their own, when you have 8 hotels, 10 hotels in the city, it's a great candidate for clustering. And nowadays, with technology, it's much easier. So we're using this sort of reset time to relook at how we operate hotels without affecting service, of course.
Well, it's terrific, and I guess since you are mostly owned assets with majority as your own ownership, implementing some of these initiatives is far easier than if you are in a operating environment. But the organizational structure in the hotels has evolved very, very, very quickly. One more question, Peng, before I turn it over to Sam. Any particular geographies in your portfolio that are showing better recovery trends? Any hotels that you see are starting to come back stronger?
Yeah, I mean, just in relation to what you said earlier, it is easier to make actually structural changes. Being own operator, you're absolutely right. We own 70% of most of our hotels, and it's a lot easier, and we're taking full advantage of that. to make changes internally so that when the situation improves, we are in a lot fitter, better position. Yeah. So, but anyway, looking at the country scan, countries with bigger domestic market, I think will thrive a lot faster, a lot better. So a case in point is China. China without opening its international skies, domestic market is huge, and really from our Ningbo to Beijing to Suzhou to Dalian to Tianjin, they can literally fill up the hotel with domestic market and also weddings and also even local meetings. But of course, anytime there is some issue happening, let's say, example, recently the spike in Hebei, Beijing and Tianjin will be affected because it's all around that area. But tough stand, within a few weeks, it's probably back to normal. Yeah, Australia too has a huge domestic market, so I think it's a very good opportunity to grow. 80% of our business actually is from interstate travels all over Australia. So, of course, once there's a lockdown, then we have to depend on isolation business. But the moment it frees up, the domestic market itself can sustain very easily. Countries like Singapore, some of the Asian countries, very small domestic market. So we've got to be very ingenious, got to be very creative. We've got to attract a smaller base. Example, in Singapore, there is close to 60,000 hotel rooms. It's like every 60,000 of the hotel's room opening at the same time, beckoning, 3 million, of course, age 16 and above Singaporeans, locals. So it is tough, but at the same time, we need to be very, very creative. Hybrid meetings, very outdoor weddings, F&B offerings that if you pay $400 for your room, you get $400 of F&B credits. I mean, it's just a whole gambit of ways to draw a small market. So to answer your question, those with bigger domestic clientele, a market, they will flourish.
Well, thank you, Peng. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be back with you in a moment.
Thank you. I was wondering about during the time where your hotels have been closed or are closed, giving the opportunity, how much of the renovation work do you do, or kind of freshen up the properties ready for when you can open up again? Anything you want to share with us on that front?
Yes, very, very good question, because, during the COVID, what we did was we took the opportunity. We had actually planned to have a lot of our hotels kind of renovate and operate at the same time, But during COVID, for instance, we closed a few hotels and fast track, on the renovation. So, example, with the Park Royal Collection, Marina Bay, the former Marina Mandarin, and by closing it down, instead of a year or year and a half, we've managed to do it in about 7 months, fully renovating the whole hotel. Same with Kuala Lumpur, and we've fully done up, about 7 or 8 of our properties, including the one in Penang resort. So, I think in crisis there are opportunities, and what that time is that when there's downtime, we actually speed up on the asset enhancement initiative on the renovation to just so that when things are better, we are actually ready to take off. Yeah, so that's what we've been doing, fast-tracking renovation programs.
Yeah, very good. So thank you. That's excellent that you have taken that opportunity to do that, and that obviously is much better than when the guests are ready to come. Then you have a freshen up property for them to welcome them. Well, that was really my only question. I know that everyone like yourself, do you have all kinds of services in Singapore where there's restaurants delivering food or and so on? But I think that's maybe a discussion for another time. So let me hand over to Abid.
Peng, talk a little bit about the resorts in your portfolio. What changes do you foresee in that segment of travel? You talked a little bit about the domestic travel, but broadly speaking, what changes have you had to make specifically in the resort environment?
Yeah, I think it's a huge, big, pent-up demand for resorts. Example, for instance, our Park Royal Penang Resort. It's so pent up that it's about 80-90% occupancy. People are just flocking to the outdoors. They're flocking to, where there's nature, and we're beginning to see, big market for that. But I must also say that, there is a great opportunity for what I call urban resorts. And so, when we actually had the chance to renovate, the Park Royal Collection, Marina Bay, we turned it into an urban resort. We put in 2,400 trees and shrubs. It's all, solar paneled, and it's eco-friendly. People are coming to actually see the property, and they're actually spending vacation or staycation and all that in urban city, but they get a totally different feeling. We had that Park Royal Collection at Pickering, where 200% of our total gross floor area is trees and plants and rainwater collection and solar panels and glow lights. So urban resorts, we even added urban farms, is becoming a very people are even, if they have a choice, they'll take al fresco dining to internal restaurant dining. I mean, people are just more conscious of the outdoors, the nature, environment, and we're starting to remove a lot of plastics. No more those plastic water bottles. It's amazing how many of these plastic bottles the hotel consume. But we put in, we had to invest in filtered water. We invest in pumps so that we take away all these small little bath gel bottles, plastic bottles. So people are more conscious during this time. So we're also going into urban resorts. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Peng. That was fabulous input. Please stay with us, and we'll have you back in a moment. At this particular point, I'd like to bring Stefan Leser in based out of Hong Kong. Stefan, thanks for joining us. Talk a little bit about, at the beginning of 2020, what was on your to-do list and what survived going through the pandemic.
What was on the to-do list was expansion, and actually the focus for us from a portfolio perspective for 2020 was actually on resorts. If you look at our portfolio, we are predominantly city center based, key letterhead cities, mainland China, Australia, New Zealand, as well as Hong Kong, North America, and then in London. So the one focus we had was growing and basically into the ultra luxury resort space. That didn't happen in 2020. And the other one that did actually happen is our expansion into Europe. While the brand, the Langham, originates from London, the Langham London was our only property so far in Europe, and we took care a little bit of that in 2020 in opening up the Langham Nymphenburg residence in Munich, and also working on additional properties and expansions in Europe. We made an acquisition and gonna build a fantastic resort in Venice, and we're in the making of that, and there are some other things in the pipeline. So that
fabulous.
Survived, was changed a little bit, but in general that was the direction.
Terrific. During any crisis, but this pandemic, we have had to be very nimble. We're learning almost as we go along. Communication becomes an absolute key. Share some best practices for us, Stefan, internally, externally. How did you stay connected with all the stakeholders, please?
Given that our portfolio is around the globe and on 4 continents, so starting in Auckland and ending basically in Los Angeles if you go around. So technology was always in use because you couldn't be at all the places at the same point in time. I think the adaptation of things like what we do right now, meetings on with video conferences and so forth, became a lot more important. Then also the communication with the teams and actually being quite open in terms of what we know, how we see the situation, but also what we don't know was particularly important to not only get a sense of where they are, but also have the opportunity that we have from a portfolio perspective made use of, that we share the practices or that we share the experiences more so than maybe the best practices in the beginning, because we saw right late January, pretty much a year ago, what happened in China, as Peng has said with his resorts in China as well. And then there we were still in full swing in operations in North America and Australia and in the UK. And only by the end of February, beginning of March, it hit us there. And then we could learn some of the things that we had adopted from our operations and from our adaptations that we did with our basically hotels and our operations in mainland China.
Well, looking at 2021, any strategic initiatives that you can share relative to reopening the hotels, and as the hotels start to operate around the globe, anything particular that you're focused on?
The strategy, and we had actually a meeting with all our sales and all our MDs this morning. And what I said there is pretty much the way we think at the moment, is that the strategy stays in place and we continue to basically progress on that. The only thing that we cannot really judge is the timing and whether some of the priorities might change, just because from an opportunistic perspective, certain things arise as opportunities and other things are simply not possible because you can't get there, or you can't travel, or you simply don't have the ability to open up and get certain things done. From a timings perspective, I think if somebody would have told us a year ago that we would be here today and don't know whether it goes another 6 months, another 8 months, or another 12 months, I think that might not have been helpful. But right now, I think we all learned to pivot and to look at what can we do with the circumstances that are actually in place. And as it has been described also by my predecessors here, is that some of the regulations are beyond your control and you need to deal with the circumstances. And that's what we've done. And I think our teams in general, not only with our company, but I think our industry in general has proven to be incredible, agile, nimble, and dealing with those really harsh circumstances that have hit us particularly hard as our industry.
Stefan, the changes that you had to bring about, whether they're organizational or structural changes in your organization. Now, you're also most of your asset, or a good chunk of your assets at this particular point, are owned estate. Can you share some of the changes from organizational structure point of view that might have been implemented and that might have worked well? And I'll turn it over to Sam after this.
I pretty much have a copy answer from Peng, because we've done exactly the same. You know, we looked at how can we delay, or how can we actually question the way we do things and take a step back. And normally when you open up a hotel and it's not a seasonal property, you know, it's always on, and you rarely have the time to take a step back and say, look, do we want to continue to do things in the way we are doing them, combining roles, looking at even making jobs more attractive. At the same point in time, obviously also looking for cost savings and efficiencies. So we did all what has been described before. And I think that's a benefit that we will take along when we're back into some form of normality. I think that's one of the major points I would think. We also looked at what can we do from an asset upkeep perspective? How can we do investments? How can we actually fast forward some of the renovations? The Langham Boston, which will reopen by the middle of this year, is one of the major renovations that we've done, and will be obviously, when it returns, one of our crown jewels in the portfolio.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for that. Let me turn it over to Sam, and I'll be with you in a moment.
Thank you. Well, my question relates to to your Cordis brand. What is your strategy now to grow the brand? I understand that there has been you have had several brands under Langham before and through the history, but now you are focusing on the Cordis. So if you could share some thoughts on where you see the Cordis growing and positioning.
We're currently growing the Cordis brand predominantly in mainland China, and there we've opened up a lot of resorts that are in urban areas, not really urban resorts, but within the vicinity of some major cities in China. The Cordis brand, and the name Cordis, from Latin from heart, is around well-being, and I have a strong focus on also our Chuan spas, about traditional Chinese medicine. As at the same point in time, we feel that we should concentrate on growing that brand predominantly at the moment in mainland China, and then take it to where maybe those Chinese travelers will go in the future. A little bit like what I've heard from Puneet around the strategy that they have with the Touch brand and the Ginger brand as well.
So I think that's very interesting, because there has been the travel trends, and what the expectations of travelers are, that as we call the millennial travels, they have some particular expectations on their brand, and they are more interested in the experience, and rather than the collecting the points and so on and amenities necessary. But what I would be interested to know is that do you see that your Heart brand is also perfectly suited for the European market, as it is a brand, and you have lots of millennials in this part of the world?
I think it will be. It's more from a company, from a corporate perspective. The question: when do you basically stretch your resorts too thin, and when is the right time to go? I mean, do I necessarily look for one isolated Cordis in Europe? Maybe not. If there is a portfolio opportunity that presents itself to us, then we might look at this one. At the same point in time, we wouldn't be hesitant to go if the right opportunity presents itself.
Sure. And now just a general question for you. Where do you see the future of business travel and meetings, since the meetings and the meeting incentive business plays quite a large role for many hotel companies?
I think it will return maybe at a much slower rate than the leisure travel. I think that's not a pretty difficult prediction to make. At the same point in time, I also feel that the companies will experience that the connection and what I would call the coincidental let's say creativity that comes out of physical meetings and interactions is something that is very, very important. While we have Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, things like that, we all need to step back and look at it, and they're very structured. And a lot of those over the coffee conversations that create opportunities because you overhear something and connect, and basically connect maybe with another colleague, those things don't happen. So what we are doing is we're trying to prepare our hotels with offers that allow hybrid forms of meetings, but also create environments that maybe foster that kind of creativity when you have events and meeting spaces. And then that's an offer that we basically need to communicate to our corporate customers. And then I think it really depends on whether the companies release the budgets and allow their employees to travel and connect, whether it's a budget concern or it's a health concern. But Do I expect a slower return than to the high-end leisure? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Before I hand over to Abid, just a final question about the upcoming Lunar New Year holidays. And since you have so many hotels in China, where do you see the domestic market and the travel in China? Will you be seeing your hotels are getting booked for the particular time period, or what is the situation for you?
As it has been said before, I think the Chinese or the opportunity in China is that there is a humongous domestic market. Now, the travel restrictions or the recommendations that are in place is that people should stay in their provinces, which still gives us the opportunity to basically host them in our fantastic hotels. I think that the communication and the conversation with the clients will be a very different one than if you have people from abroad or from far away, because when they then come to you, one of the most important things is that they might know the city. They come to you for a very different reason, and we need to make sure that we give them the offers and the things that actually attract them to spend their money with us. And so that's a big opportunity. Similar for Hong Kong. Initially, when the whole staycation business started, I was a little bit skeptical because I said, look, why would I need another bed in Hong Kong? I have a bed in Hong Kong, but then there is the need and the desire to experience something different. And this is something that we cater for, whether we call it staycation or whatever else, doesn't really matter. But people want to go out and experience, whether it's on an F&B side or just create experiences that trigger them and for the whole family.
Yeah. I mean, even some hotel companies are talking that they want to add another desk in the hotel room to be as a work desk. So there are a lot of people who are thinking along those lines. But thank you very much, Stefan, for your great input. And let me hand over now to Abid.
Stefan, just going back a bit, Sam had mentioned and you alluded to the business travel segment recovering possibly the latest. I was just reading an article from McKinsey yesterday that talked about the same trend, that business travel, whether it's because of the health of the organizations, it's because of the confidence of the traveler, that would recover possibly at the tail end of it. Your portfolio being that it's predominantly business hotel, urban cores, is there another segment that you will replace the business segment in immediate terms? Is there anything particular to pivot from business travel as a base business?
Every one of our properties has a different mix in terms of where the clients, the guests come from, and so the challenge is very different. If there is more of a domestic, also business component, I think those properties will recover quicker and those demands will come back quicker. We have other opportunities when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to celebrations. One of the topics that is very core to our heart, and creating those celebrations for our clients that they have always trusted their time with us. And so this is one of the areas where we have actually started about a year and a half ago to be very particular about. And I think that's one of the things that we are concentrating on. We don't have the large Indian weddings, but we have a lot of areas where the little celebrations to some bigger celebrations, when they're allowed to come back, will form one of our additional focus points from a demands perspective.
One last question before we bring everybody back into the conversation. Any best practices you have experienced from a destination marketing point of view? Because all countries, all geographies, all constituencies, they want to be able to attract people back to their destinations. Have you seen anything that is working better than the other as we prepare for the recovery?
Well, since I was a surfer when I was young, right? There is one thing that you learn is that when you start swimming too early, you lose a lot of energy. It's the same if you swim too late, you don't catch the wave. And I think the real question is, when is the right time to actually open the tubs and start spending money on promotions of your destinations? Because a lot of the efforts at the moment, as good as they might be, they just may not bring the effects to those destinations or even to individual companies. So I think this will be the biggest question mark, not about doing the right thing, but also finding the right timing to actually spend the money and generate the demand.
Fair enough. Sam, if it's okay, let's bring everybody back in. But Stefan, I'll continue the conversation with you. Are you projecting full recovery to be next year? What is your prognosis as to when the business would come back?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, we have, I think in the last 12 months, I have been, every time I tried to look at what the time horizon is, I have been wrong, right? So, and I think it's also important that the conversation that I have with my teams is that we concentrate on the things and we spend energy on the things that we really can impact. And I cannot impact the pace of the recovery. So I need to make sure that my teams focus on the things that it's worthwhile spending energy and not worry about whether the time is 2 years, 4 years, 3 years. It doesn't really matter. It's about what can we do today, what can we do tomorrow, and making sure that we do that to the best of our abilities.
Terrific. Peng, a question for you. From business acquisition point of view, are you seeing any changes? Are there different demands from the clients that you are fielding at this point?
Yeah, so we are on a contrarian type of basis when nobody is going out to look for deals. To me, that's the best time to look out. So we are looking out for distressed assets. We are looking out at developed countries, key gateway cities, where pre-COVID, they'll be too expensive. But we're on a hunt, specific cities, specific key gateway cities, and certain hurdle rates that we need to meet, but we have a better chance right now. It'll still be to us very yield-based driven. In other words, it will still be in key gateway cities. Although we have signed quite a number of resort and management contracts, a lot of our investments will actually be in business cities, financial centers, where a lot of the capital appreciation would see, that growth when the situation improves. So a good time to look around. We're diving in on a few potential sites, and you'd be surprised. I think some of the values could be even on the stress level, be 30-40% below its valuation. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Puneet, what can the industry anticipate to be the different in 2021? Obviously, we've talked about the pandemic. What services do you think will be changed out that might or might not be applicable in the way that we operating? What new amenities might be implemented in the hotels?
I think I'd like to catch on to what Stefan said. The answer is I don't know. What I know, let's say we put it in 3 buckets: what we know, what we think we know, and what we don't know. So I would stick to what we know, in that the services would be less. And the services would be less intrusive. We will not. Nobody would like to be over-serviced, asked too much. People want to go, enjoy, rest, but not have 4 people or 5 people hanging around them to pour water, to serve meal, to clear the trays. It's okay, things can wait, but we'll be more focused on who is serving you. There'll still be that psychological factor of social distancing. Even though you've had the vaccine, it just will become a part of our lives to maintain some form of distance and not expect to be overserviced. Especially in Asia, we tend to have too much of service versus Europe or US. So I think Asia will have the opportunity to move a bit towards the Western Hemisphere.
Well,
Also on the
true.
amenities,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, on the amenities, I think also the industry has suffered maybe from amenity creep, and it will be less of that. I think quality would be more important than quantity of things.
Well, you are absolutely correct. If you look at the mature markets, labor models are very, very, very different. But then again, looking at Asia Pacific hotels, they are far superior than what you might find in North America or for that matter in Europe, because we build beautiful, gorgeous hotels and we staff them really well, sometimes a little too well. So that operating model will have to be changed. One of the things that came out in a survey that was performed by University of Washington was the technological adoption. They did a survey with the travelers, and 70% of the people said that there has got to be more technology for the interface between the service staff and consumer before they'll feel comfortable going to the hotel. Stefan, do you have any thoughts on what new technologies might be becoming available as a result of this pandemic?
I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball in terms of what technologies might become available. What has happened, also for us is that you look at your technology stack in terms of and where you can upgrade and how you can do that. But that's a lot of it is in the back office and also in the building maintenance and in the, the parts that the customers don't see and hopefully don't need to see, where it's about predictive maintenance, preventive maintenance, and from an energy management perspective. Those are costs that you can save and obviously increase your efficiency. From a customer interaction perspective, I think we all have catch up to play in ease of use. When I look at just connecting devices and how people have come to us and challenged us in terms of how easy it is to actually interoperate with the things we give to them, whether it's televisions or set up meetings and cameras and internet speed. And I think those things are now not differentiating factors anymore. I think there are hygiene factors, and if you don't have them in place, they disqualify you, and basically then business is gone. And I think that's where the challenge lies, especially when you are an asset owner and you have to do the investments, because there is not necessarily an ROI that you can pinch to for additional revenues. There is an ROI that you have to calculate, because otherwise some businesses and some revenues are gone when you're not doing those investments.
Well, hotels have typically lagged in technology adoption. One, because hotels tend to be thin margin business. Technology is very expensive and it's changing way too fast. So we have a tendency to wait for the next guy to implement, and then we'll look at it afterwards. So it is a dilemma that the industry is up against, but appropriately deployed technology, Stefan, like you mentioned, in away from guest-facing area, that could really be a cost-saving initiative. Peng, a question for you. How do we gain consumer confidence? Each country, each little geography, all of us have done different things during this pandemic. Our standards are different. How do we gain consumer confidence so that they will feel comfortable traveling to our destination?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, because if you look at all the major hotel chains, everyone has got a video that says, I clean the room, I use whatever, hospital grade detergent and whatever. I think that's a given, and no more a separator. And I think that, even it said also that people don't want too many fuss and people walking in and out of the room. So I think it's a given that our standard of cleanliness, our detergents, our chemicals use, gotta be super great. All right, but that's a given. I think the key word that I think is building trust, and building trust comes from a few other things than just cleaning. All right, example is even what Puneet said about CSR. If we are there to take care of the community, you know, we're looking after the homeless, we're looking after the families in need. The the potential guests will see what we're doing, and they will just say, maybe if this company cares for the needy and the community, maybe they have it in their heart to care for me. And I think that's building trust, you know. And I think we have to do it, you know, spontaneously, and the staff and the team are, you know, I've done it, and I've seen the spirit just liven up, you know, when they help others. Now, besides looking after the guests, cleaning, and looking after the community, I mentioned earlier also, if we are able to look after the environment, you know, and I think really as we look at the hotel scene, there's just so many wastage. Food wastage, there's plastic wastage, there's, you know, just a gross amount of things that we should do away with. And if we look after the environment, you know, and even energy, frankly, we're using, in Singapore, for instance, let me tell you, I don't know why buildings are so cold. It's as though air conditioning is free, energy is free, but just by even lowering, adjusting the temperature, we're reducing on wastage. So if we look after the environment, you know, perhaps people who stay in our hotels, they'll say, if these guys care enough for the environment, maybe they care for me, you know. And I think also how we look after our own people, because really during the reset, I think it's really important that we build trust among our associates as well. You know, what we say should be what we do. You know, we should empower them. We should, you know, every time we ask them to do something, they do something wrong, we whack them. I mean, that totally cuts off trust, you know. So how do we really build up on trust within the team itself, so that even when a guest stays in a hotel, they can actually observe whether you're service from the heart. So anyway, you got me started there. I think it's just a whole series of things that we need to do to build trust.
Well, thank you for that. And quite candidly, your point about cleanliness, I think our industry might have done a bit of disservice, that the message that consumers got was, well, we've just started cleaning our hotels.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Prior to this, the hotels were dirty. But I think what we have done in the past, we would hide cleaning in the middle of the night, or at a point where it was away from our guests' viewpoint. Putting that in front of them, maybe that has gained confidence. But quite candidly, the hotels possibly over all these years have been the most clean places ever. One more question, and I'll turn it over to Sam. Peng talked about sustainability efforts. It is becoming crucial. Puneet had talked about wellness travel. During this pandemic, we have heard that the places like Los Angeles have got better air quality. The Grand Canal in Venice was cleaner. Places like Beijing, air quality was far better. A question for you, Stefan. Any particular sustainability initiatives that you are thinking about implementing moving forward?
Sustainability is one of the things that is also very close to the heart of our owner, and this is important because I think if you don't have the backing from all the way from where the capital comes from, it's very difficult, and then people will very clearly and very easily determine that it's purely lip service. So what we're trying to do is we're looking at you know, simple things that we can do and pull them throughout the portfolio. I mean, plastic is one of the things that I think all of us have seen shocking pictures, and to be honest, were revelations to me in terms of how much damage has been done in that. And these are things where we also, as an industry, we sometimes have to be maybe a little bit more brave. I was told a long time that you can get rid of single-use plastic everywhere except for China, because the customers will not allow that to happen. And then there came a decree from the government, and it was gone, and nobody questioned it anymore. And so I think some of those bold moves in terms of getting rid of those plastic bottles and so forth, and making investments in terms of also when it comes to food waste. We have made some very strong commitments on reductions on our energy footprint, and we are basically also from a listing perspective in a segment where we have a REIT that is actually listed in a green index, where you basically monitor, and we get penalized on if we don't achieve reductions in energy consumption. We have pled to zero waste to landfill, those kind of things. And I think they're very, very much important. Whether this is something that you communicate to the guests or not, I'm not so sure. I think people, and a lot of them, especially the younger generations, they will research, they will find in terms of whether you do the right thing or you do the wrong thing. I'm not so sure that it's something that I would advertise, but I think it's almost, especially in the high-end luxury piece, if you don't follow through, and if you don't do the right thing, I think people will definitely punish you as an organization.
You know, unfortunately, during pandemic, our industry might have regressed a little bit because single-use things, it had to be brought back for a little while, but hopefully it'll be a short-term thing. And you're absolutely correct. The younger generation is almost demanding that the companies, the businesses, are far more careful with sustainable elements. I can speak to that personally. Our son, God help us if by mistake you dropped a recyclable element in a garbage. All hell breaks loose at our house, because it's got to be done properly, and he won't have it any other way. So I think the future consumers are demanding that. Thank you for that. Let me turn it over to Sam for a bit, and I'll be back with you, Sam.
Yes, just a side comment on this. One of the worrying trends in Europe, and here particularly in Northern Europe, has been where people are using masks and seem to be throwing them away innocently, and also the cigarette butts. Those are two areas which are creating the microplastic in the future, and people don't seem to think that how bad a cigarette butt or a mask is in polluting the environment, and became quite a big headline news in our little country Finland. But what I want to ask, I think that I have been in discussion with certain hotel colleges and also industry experts about the worrying trend that the hotel school graduates don't enter into the industry, and also in particular in this very difficult time where many young professionals are sort of between assignments. I'd like to ask all of you, in fact, what advice would you give young hoteliers and future leaders to what should they do with themselves? Is this industry worthwhile to continue? Maybe we can start with Puneet. Could you give us your, and then Peng, and then Stefan?
Any other advice but to get into this industry and continue, because that's what I've done for 40 years. It's very fascinating, it's simple, it's very exciting, and and the future was bright. The tourism industry and the hotel industry combined created or contributed 10% to the global GDP, 10% to all the jobs, and 25% to all new jobs created pre-pandemic. And I see no reason why this is not coming back with vengeance. So the future is bright for the industry.
Thank you. And how about you, Peng?
Well, I really think that as us hoteliers, we might have to really do a better job. I think hotel industry has been known to be quite slow in adopting technology. You can give an example. I mean, airlines have been using yield management, revenue management ages ago, and we only started 10, 15 years ago. And how we develop, our give example, for even up to now, until recently, a lot of housekeepers, they call them linen attendants. They would sort out dirty linen, and it's very dirty job, dirty pillowcases, dirty sheets, and they'll sort it out and then put it in different bags and then send them on laundry. Right now we invested RFID, for instance. You dump the whole thing there, nobody touches it. It goes straight into the laundry company, the tunnel washers, they detect, they resort it out, they rebag it, comes back, all sorted out, no human touch. What I'm trying to say is this, we are too slow in adopting technology. I mean, even use of mobile, why did we have, frankly speaking, we don't even need a front desk, it should be a deskless check-in. You need a pillow menu or something, just click on it, the pillow comes. So when we redesign our jobs, then the young people will find it worthwhile, as an industry that's moving faster, more forward. There's so many things, business and analysis, we could use SAP, all this, can go really, we can go miles faster. So maybe when we redesigned it, our jobs, let's pay them more, it will attract more of the younger ones.
Very good, thank you. And how about you, Stefan? Your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe if I look at the human side, I always recommend to people, if you are a positive person, and that's why I say I only hire happy people, and not because I judge happy people higher, but you have to have a positive energy, because if you need energy to stay positive, to show up for work, then you will not last. But if you're a positive person, then I think you can't enter another industry that is as rewarding than ours, because making people happy, this is what we do, and making their lives better in that respect. You get a lot of energy out of this. And I think there are very few industries where you can make a career like you can do in hospitality. You can literally start as a doorman and end up as running a hotel company. And I think this is something that is amazing, and not a lot of industries provide that opportunity. Dealing with the world, working around the world, having not to worry about certificates, whether I am a doctor and I can work in India or I can work in Singapore. I think our industry is used to recruit globally, and you can work globally. And I think those are some of the things that are super attractive. So if you have the right energy and feel that you want to deal with people and you want to interact with people, then hospitality is one of the very best places to choose for your career.
Thank you. Abid, do you have another question before I go over to the feel-good stories part?
No, I think, look, at this particular point, I would like to thank our panelists. I think it's been very enriching conversation. Puneet Chhatwal, Peng Choe, and Stefan Leser, thank you for joining us. It's been great to have you. We really appreciate your input, and I'm sure our viewers would enjoy a great deal. So, Sam, over to you for closing.
Well, thank you. I also like to thank all the live viewers and also the replay viewers who have joined us today. We had several viewers. I think we had now, I just in count, probably must have been over 100 viewers that have joined us, and mostly lots of thumbs up. That's very good social currency for us, because that means the algorithm will raise the viewership eventually. But I also like to mention that if you look here, I think over here will be a video that you should, if you're watching it from YouTube, in the recorded portion, there will be a video that will give us another insight from one of the industry leaders. So with these words, I will just close this episode, and please stay tuned for our next episode. And if you liked what you saw, we don't ask you to subscribe, just put like. That is enough for us. We are not very ambitious. We are humble, and we are happy that everyone who has joined us today. So thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.